All right, let's talk about support. Support is one of those terms that gets used so much in the singer communities. And in my voice science class at Westminster, I like to deconstruct that term to talk about what it is, what it isn't, why it's a great term, and why personally I wish I could find a better term for it. I think it mostly just has a lot of baggage. It has this idea that anything that's wrong with our sound can be fixed with more support, whatever that means. And from my perspective, it's not about having more support, but it's more about balancing support. For me, support is the way that the breath relates to the vocal folds. That we don't want the breath just to kind of blow through them. We want the vocal folds to stay thick and resist the airflow a little bit. In fact, that's where I think the term support comes from. The Italians called it appoggio, which means to lean, or appoggiarsi a, to lean upon. And I think the sensation that they were feeling was that they had thickly ducted vocal folds with air pushing up underneath them that resisted that. And the air was literally leaning against the vocal folds. And so it's about balancing the flow of air to the production of sound. And I think we're also supporting the literal position of the larynx within the throat. Now, how do we do that in general? And how do we do that virtually when oftentimes I can't even hear the students because they're muted because they're in a choir? For me, I have found the most success by using what I call heavy occlusions. In the last video, we talked about an occlusion is anything that partially occludes the vocal tract, like a lip trill. For me, I have found the best thing to be straws. And not just any straws, but I'm currently using a 4 millimeter tube. One of my students bought these for me. You can buy them online. You can also use coffee stirrers. Those are great. Most people, however, just have good old-fashioned regular soda straws. But what we can do with soda straws is we can pinch the end. And if we pinch the end, we reduce the flow of air through the outside, and we get a buildup of pressure. Now, a word about pressure. Pressure is not a bad thing. Pressure is actually quite good for the voice. As a male singer in particular, in the top part of my voice, there's a fair bit of pressure, and we need that pressure to drive the vocal folds to produce a really harmonically rich sound. There's a difference between pressure and tension. Tension, not what we're looking for, but pressure is probably okay. Pressure requires engagement, and that's why I kind of like the heavier occlusions. If your students don't have a straw, they don't have the little metal tube, or they don't have the coffee stirrer or even a soda straw, you can have them imagine what it's like to blow through one of those. I call that kind of like a buzzy bee. You can also have them sing on a V or a TH. All three of those work fairly well. And when I'm asking them to do the straw, where to place their focus, right? They usually start in the middle of the voice. It's always a good idea to start teaching in the middle of voice, especially when you're doing remote. Things they can think about. First, in general, I always advocate my students to allow the voice to vibrate on every single pitch, with the full awareness that not every style requires vibration. And in certain choral ensemble pieces, a simpler tone is probably really useful. I teach musical theater. Not all musical theater stuff needs to vibrate. There's a recording of Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau singing, I think it's Dichterliebe, where he is straight on like 70% of the recording. However, from a functional perspective, a free and vibrant tone is more efficient. And when we're building technique, when we're warming our choirs up, or we're getting a song into our voice, I think we need to start with that functional efficiency. Not because we have to, but because we should be able to. So, in an exercise like a 5-note scale up and down, I'll ask them to think about, can the first note, the top note, and the last note vibrate? And notice it took a little time for that to kind of settle, right? And this is a term I use a lot. And it's that idea that when we first start singing something, sometimes it's like the voice fights itself. And it's like, doesn't want it, and then it just melts. And the vibrato becomes more even. It feels more grounded, more stable. That's the body figuring out this delicate balance between breath flow and pressure and the vocal folds themselves. And so I'll ask my students to allow the voice to settle. It doesn't always work. There's going to be days, we all have days, but we work toward that. We allow the voice to settle. If you're dealing with a younger population, vibrato is not always inherent. I'm talking about particularly middle school and then freshmen, sophomores, and even the junior, senior level, depending on when the voice has gone through puberty. It will typically occur at the end of a pitch first. Great. If you are able to listen to the student, you notice it, acknowledge, hey, listen to the vibrato coming in. See if you can allow that to come in earlier. Let your singers know it's okay if the voice isn't vibrating. Don't see if you can keep them from manufacturing the vibrato is where I'm getting at. As long as they're doing the exercise and they're listening for it, the body will learn. And as maturity catches up with them, it will start to function correctly. So let the voice settle. Think about the various pressures that we're feeling in our body. When I sing through the straw, I feel engagement in my abdominal wall, and that's totally appropriate. It's what I want. And so I need to tap into what that motion is. It doesn't get rigid and stick. Rather, I feel a gentle movement. And so ask your students to think about what's moving in their abdomen as they're singing. What moves? Probably out when they inhale. Where is that point? We talked about the thumbs in that previous video. And then how does that move when they begin to sing? They can listen to the sound of the air, right? Much like the lip trills, we felt it on our hands, we felt the buzz on our lips. We can listen for the of the air coming out of the straw, just to make certain that it is consistent. If they're doing a V or a TH, this is very easy. Listen for that turbulence of the air and make certain, as with the hissing exercise earlier, it is very consistent. And then with this exercise, as with the lip trills, listen for the quality of the vowel. Just because the voice settles doesn't mean the position of the articulators is correct. Probably not what we're going for. Is more akin to what we're looking for. I find straws to be very beneficial. I always give them out to my students when they come into lessons. But it's not something that's so difficult for students to come by that if they're at home, they probably can get some straws.